the failure to hold people accountable has graver consequences, because the US is in some respects an exemplary nation. Many countries look at it, many countries look to it as a standard setter, both in terms of good standards and bad standards. And if you have the former Vice President Dick Cheney coming out and politically and morally justifying waterboarding and using scare tactics to say that if you abandon these so-called enhanced interrogation techniques, you will render the US more vulnerable and you will be responsible for any terrorist attacks that happen. In other words, to make a political and moral argument in favor of waterboarding is very, very, very dangerous, because not even Augusto Pinochet or the Argentinian generals or the apartheid leaders tried to make a moral or political argument for torture. Sure, they tortured, sure, they authorized and justified torture, but they were always, at least publicly and politically, ashamed of torture. Now you have the former Vice President of the United States making a moral and political case for torture. And what's doubly dangerous is you have US lawyers acting in the Justice Department trying to make a legal case for torture, trying to render torture a non-crime by defining it away. And the combination of legally justifying it and morally and politically justifying it sets a terrible precedent. And I understand that this occurred in the context of 9/11, and 9/11 was a terrible tragedy for which justice is certainly due. But there are scores and scores of countries around the world who have suffered crimes both in qualitative and in quantitative terms far worse than 9/11. And if those countries experience those crimes and say that those are existential threats to us, and therefore justify us abandoning human rights, abandoning any semblance of principle, and justifying these forms of conduct, then we've basically thrown away the advances that we've achieved in human rights terms since the end of World War II. So it's vitally important that the Obama administration adopt a more robust approach to this. And as a person who is otherwise a great admirer of President Obama, I'm worried that the administration is being too diffident and too cautious on this. And I think that if it continues on this track, it will set a terrible precedent.